This is part one on unemployment. We'll be looking at the different kinds of natural rate of unemployment, and part two will be on a different PowerPoint. So, a question in general, would you want to either live in a country or an economy where innovation wasn't embraced, it continued to make outdated products like a horse and buggy or VHS tapes? Well, you'd probably answer no. You want certain industries to die out, and you'd like to embrace certain new industries and encourage them to flourish. The type of unemployment caused by industries that are dying out or who have technologically innovated so they don't need as much labor, or perhaps they've moved offshore. For any of these reasons, we call this structural unemployment. And it's a type of unemployment where we would not want it to be zero because we don't want to live in an economy with outdated products and where new innovations are not embraced. Would you also want to live in a country where you couldn't change your job? You couldn't improve yourself and your skills and get a better job? You had to put up with a toxic boss? Well, I think most of us again would say no. And this is known as frictional unemployment, which we'll look at in more detail in a few slides. But this also is a type of unemployment where we wouldn't want it to be zero. And lastly, would you want to live in a country where seasonal work was banned? There was no one to pick fruits or vegetables. There were no ski instructors. There were no lifeguards. And again, we would answer no. So this is known as seasonal unemployment, and we wouldn't want it to be zero either. So these types of unemployment, the structural, which was the first one, if we add that with the frictional unemployment, which was the second, and the seasonal unemployment, we would get the natural rate of unemployment. And this natural rate of unemployment is not zero, nor do we want it to be zero. Full employment and the PPF. The term full employment, in the context of the production possibilities models, means that the maximum use of all resources in an economy, so that includes labor, to produce the maximum quantity of goods and services in that economy is capable of producing. So if we were looking at full employment, where is the country producing it in relation to its PPF? Let's draw a PPF, and it could be producing anywhere along its PPF if we have full use of our labor force. Full employment and the ADAS model. In the ADAS model, full employment is when the economy is producing its potential output. So in other words, it's going to be in its long-run equilibrium, and there's no inflationary or recessionary gap. So remember to label the axes. So we could call this real GDP or output and call this price level. And we're operating where AD, SAS, and the LAS curve all intersect, and it's the natural rate of unemployment. So remember here, full employment, which is the same thing as the natural rate of unemployment, does not mean zero unemployment. There is some unemployment equal to the natural rate of unemployment. So why do governments not want high unemployment? Well, one, it's politically very unpopular. It has greater income inequality. It could lead to social unrest. We would have lower GDP. We would have lower taxes, or lower taxes collected. And if lower taxes collected, we have less money to put to merit goods or other things such as infrastructure or the military. And I'll just put etc. There's many reasons why the government do not want high unemployment. Increases in economic growth generally decrease unemployment. And are there any negative outcomes of economic growth? Well, you can also think of inflation. There could be pollution, non-sustainability, and I'll put etc. So some of these, definitions are very important to understand. So unemployment. So it's people of working age. So it's not babies and it's not retired people. So number one, they have to be of working age, which is generally considered to be between 16 and 64 for most people. Obviously without work. They have to be available for work and they have to be actively seeking employment. So this is the definition according to the International Labour Organization. The employment rate. So anytime you hear rate in economics, we're looking at a percentage. So it's the percentage of the labor force, so not the whole population, in work. So the labor force will be those who are willing and able to work, and between the ages basically of 16 and 64. And the unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force who are out of work. So are the following part of the labor force? Could they be part of unemployment? Students attending school. Well, are they able to be working at this point? So no. Parents who stay home to look after their children, so they've chosen not to work. No. Retired people? Also no. And people who choose not to or are unable to work, they would also not be part of the labor force or part of unemployment. Underemployment. Underemployment can be for one of two reasons. It can be those people who only manage to get a few hours paid work per week. They want full-time employment but can only find part-time employment. Or it could be those who have jobs that do not make full use of their skills and education. So unemployment and underemployment on a PPF. So we'll show PPF. Good, again, we've labeled it, good A and good B. And it could be anywhere inside the PPF. Because remember, on the PPF, we would have full employment. There's many difficulties in measuring unemployment. One, unemployment figures include unemployed persons who are actively looking for work. So it does not encourage discouraged workers who have given up looking for work. Two, it doesn't capture underemployment. So many part-time workers may prefer full-time work, but are not included with the unemployment because they have at least part-time work. And also unemployment figures may be overestimated since they do not include workers in the informal economy. What are the costs of unemployment? If we look at it to the unemployed, to society, to the economy as a whole. Well, to the unemployed, obviously we have loss of income. We have psychological stress. Living standards fall. And the longer you're out of work, the harder to find work. To society, there can be issues such as crime, health problems with the related health costs, more divorce, an unequal distribution of unemployment, which we're going to look at in the next few slides. And what we mean by unequal distribution of unemployment is that there's going to be certain sectors of the society who are hit more heavily with unemployment than others. For the economy as a whole, there certainly would be loss of output, loss of tax revenue, increase in government expenditure, and what I'm referring to is increasing government expenditure for such as unemployment benefits, and for all of these, the impact will depend on rate and duration of unemployment. So a national unemployment rate establishes an average for the whole country. But let's look at some typical disparities that exist among different groups of people within a country. So if we look at, obviously this is the states, but we can see throughout the states that unemployment is not evenly distributed. It's very, very different according to what area you're in. So we would call this geographical disparity. And in Canada, again, geographical disparity, but we can see in terms of the lowest rate, which might be a little bit surprising, is Saskatchewan. We could have unemployment by age, so age disparity. And if we look at where the unemployment is the highest is between 16 and 19, and is the, I would guess, well, 35 onwards, there doesn't seem to be tremendous differences. So we could have here ethnic disparities. So in this case, we're looking at women's labor market, but the ethnic differences within it, a particular study that was done. Gender disparities. And again, gender disparities, but within different countries. And it's interesting to see that, that different countries are quite different from each other. By level of education, so educational disparity. And as they say, stay in school, because if you have below high school education, you can see certainly that the unemployment rate is the highest. And then if you have higher education, that your unemployment's the lowest. But also, as one student pointed out, if you have the higher education, not only is the unemployment lower, but what's not captured in this graph is that chances are your income level is much higher as well. So you're earning much more money. So good reason to continue the studies at university. So the natural rate of unemployment. So we touched on this before. The structural, which was when industries die out and other industries emerge, so the dying out of industries or industries moving overseas or technological innovations replacing jobs. The frictional, when people are between jobs, either they're leaving because of a toxic boss, they've been fired, or they've decided to upgrade their skills. And seasonal, which is self-explanatory. So what happened to textile jobs in South Carolina? Well, chances are they were taken over, particularly by Asian countries where textile industries are very, very strong. I'm thinking of China, also other countries like Vietnam and even Bangladesh. So that would be an example of structural unemployment. So types of unemployment. When we look at structural, this arises when a structural decline takes place in certain industries, which are no longer capable of competing in their markets. They're facing a combination of changing demand, so like the horse and buggy, nobody wants it anymore. Could be new products that are being innovated elsewhere, or even domestically taking the place of old products, and new techniques of production, and new, more efficient competitors from overseas markets. This increase in international competition, or globalization, has meant that many developed economies have suffered structural unemployment. Technical unemployment is considered by some to be a form of structural unemployment, and it is the result of more labor-saving devices being used within an economy. The big thing about structural unemployment is that there's mismatches between the labor skills demanded and supplied, as well as mismatches between the physical location of workers and employers. So this is the hardest kind of unemployment to solve because we have this fundamental mismatch of skills or of location. A certain amount of structural unemployment is unavoided in any dynamic growing economy, and we've looked at why this is so. So it is part of the natural rate of unemployment. So why would structural unemployment be the most serious kind of unemployment? Well, it tends to be long-term. It's difficult to retrain, especially if older. It can be difficult to relocate. Once a business moves or relocates, it cannot easily reverse that. So I'm thinking of a business that's decided to relocate to Mexico or India or China. Perhaps discovers that maybe this wasn't the best move. It's not very easy to just pull up shop and move back again. And older workers may face the constraint that firms may prefer to hire younger workers. So we're now going to look at market-oriented measures that you can do with structural unemployment. So this means basically that the government is not involved in a hands-on method, but the market forces are leading the change. So what could you do to wages? These are going to sound like terrible things to do, but nonetheless, this is viewed as things that can help with the structural unemployment. So we could let wages fall, and particularly in depressed areas. So new firms may open up. What could you do with unemployment benefits? Again, it's going to sound awful, but you could lower benefits And so what happens then is that workers may then accept lower paid and less attractive jobs. In terms of workers' job security, again, sounds awful, but you could reduce the job security, which it means that it's less costly for firms to fire workers. And it may increase employment. And the reason that it may increase employment is that it's less costly for firms. And what could you do with personal income taxes? Well, you could lower income taxes. And then this would increase incentives for workers to accept less attractive jobs because they would have higher after-tax incomes. So let's look at intervention measures. So this is when the government, I always sort of like to say they're going to get their hands dirty. They're actually going to get actively involved in trying to solve the problem of structural unemployment. So they're going to encourage workers with skills that are no longer needed, basically to retrain and obtain skills that are in greater demand. So what could they do? They could set up appropriate training programs. They could assist youth to pursue education and training with grants and low-interest loans. They could do direct government hiring and on-the-job training. They could provide grants to firms that offer on-the-job training. And lastly, they could offer wage subsidies to firms that hire structurally unemployed workers. So how could the government encourage geographical mobility if, let's say, skills aren't the issue, but the skills are needed in a different part of the country? Well, they could provide grants and subsidies to encourage moving, or they could offer low-cost housing to relocate. How could the government encourage new hiring of structurally unemployed workers? They could offer tax or other incentives to firms to relocate, or they could establish government projects in depressed areas. So structural unemployment in terms of disadvantages to market-oriented measures, well, certainly from what we could see of what would happen to low-income workers, they would have a loss of protection. And this could lead to an increase in income inequalities. And also, we have to question the effectiveness of the measures, whether they would achieve their targeted goal of lowering structural unemployment. The loss of protection leading to an increase in income inequalities, and questioning the effectiveness. And some disadvantages to interventionist measures, well, certainly it's going to require government funds that could have been used elsewhere. So types of unemployment. Now looking at frictional. So again, it could be I'm quitting to pursue my dream of not working here, so wanting to change from one job to another. You could be fired. You want to upgrade your skills and get to a better position. So frictional unemployment. The issue here is that there's a time lag that exists between someone losing or changing a job and starting another. And such unemployment may be the result of occupational or geographical immobility, or a lack of knowledge regarding available job opportunities. So what's important is that the workers have the skills. So it's not like the structural where there's a mismatch of skills. The workers now have the skills that are transferable from one industry to another. It tends to be short term and does not involve a lack of skills that are in demand, and it's less serious than structural unemployment. A certain amount of frictional unemployment is inevitable in any growing, changing economy, where some industries expand while others contract and workers seek to advance their income and professional positions. An important cause of frictional unemployment is incomplete information. So this is really key regarding job vacancies and required qualifications. So look at this as a scenario. Imagine 100 job vacancies and 100 job applicants with the right job qualifications, but there's incomplete information to match them up quickly. So we've got the workers, we've got the job, but how are we going to match them up and have the firms find out about the workers and the workers find out about the jobs that are available? So measures to deal with frictional unemployment aim at reducing the time that a worker spends in between jobs and improving information flows between workers. Because the jobs are often there and the workers with the skills are there, but how can we reduce this time and improve the information flows? So let's first look at market-oriented benefits. So these are going to include measures to increase incentives faced by workers to accept work, thereby lessening the time in between jobs. So this is going to be similar to what we've seen before with the structural, but we're going to reduce benefits, thereby increasing the incentive to work. And it might not be the most ideal work, but they're willing to accept perhaps not the most ideal work. What could be done to personal income taxes? So again, we could reduce taxes. And again, the theory is that that should increase the incentive to work because you get to keep more of your after-tax money in your pocket. Interventionist measures. So here where the government is going to get involved. So these measures aim at improving information flows between employers and job seekers. So what could the government do? Well, they could establish more job centers, employment agencies, job websites, etc. And in fact, right around the corner, Yonge and St. Clair, if you go east on St. Clair, there's a government agency set up as a job center and can also help youth and students find summer jobs. So looking now at seasonal unemployment. So seasonal unemployment occurs when the demand for labor in certain industry changes on a seasonal basis because of variations in need. So some examples, certainly as we pointed out before, we could have fruit pickers. As the picture suggests, ice cream vendors, ski instructors, and the list goes on, etc. So seasonal unemployment. So some seasonal unemployment is unavoidable, as there will always be industries with seasonal variations in labor demand. So this is also going to be part of the natural rate of unemployment. So measures to deal with seasonal unemployment are very similar to those for lowering frictional unemployment. Efforts include providing information on jobs available during off-peak seasons in other industries. The natural rate of unemployment. So these three types of unemployment, which we already have discussed that we wouldn't want to eliminate in our economy. So the three types, the structural, frictional, and seasonal, make up the natural rate of unemployment. When we speak of an economy that has full employment, we therefore mean that the economy has an unemployment rate equal to the sum of structural, frictional, and seasonal unemployment. So let's look at a reduction of the natural rate of unemployment on the neoclassical model. So again, labeling the axes, we'll call this real GDP or output, and price level, price level. And if we have LAS1, we are increasing this to LAS2. Here we have Y1, Y2, and we have reduced the natural rate of unemployment. If we see this on the PPF model, a reduction in the natural rate of unemployment, again, don't forget to label the axes. We'll call this good A and good B. And we would have this as PPF1. And then we could show this as PPF2. Thank you.